here in Cresson, PA, just west of the historic Horseshoe Curve, where Admiral Peary was born in May 6, 1856. This is actually a memorial park for Peary.
Charles Peary and his wife Mary moved from Maine to Pennsylvania with several relatives to organize the Peary and Nutter Company.
In April of 1909, Peary was alleged to be the first person to reach the geographical North Pole.
Their only son, Robert Peary, was born on May 6, 1856, here in Cresson, PA. His father would pass away on June 28, 1859, 4 months before Robert's third birthday. Robert moved back to Maine with his mother. Robert's uncle James Peary stayed in Cresson and is buried 10 miles away in Ebensburg, PA. In 1873, Robert graduated high school second in his class. He won a scholarship to Bowdoin College, and in 1877, he graduated second in his class again with a degree in civil engineering. At age 24, Peary wrote to his mother, "I don't want to live and die without accomplishing anything or without being known beyond a narrow circle of friends." Peary then worked as a surveyor, justice of the peace, and a taxidermist to maintain an income. Peary happened to notice a government announcement for the Navy Civil Engineering Corps. After a difficult physical examination and a 10-day competitive written examination, Peary was accepted into the Navy in 1881 as a lieutenant. In 1886, Peary read a paper on the inland ice of Greenland. He then read everything available on Greenland. He then obtained a 6-month leave from the Navy and sailed as supercargo aboard a steam whaler bound for Greenland, where he carried out a 3-week reconnaissance of the Greenland ice cap. As a result of this trip, Arctic exploration would dominate Peary's interest for the rest of his life. In 1887, Peary would meet Matthew Henson. Henson was an African-American stock clerk in a Washington, D.C. hat shop. Over the next 3 decades, Henson would become Peary's close companion, assistant, and field manager for Peary's later Arctic expeditions. By this time, Henson already had 6 years of sailing experience. Between 1886 and 1897, Peary made several trips to the Arctic with his wife and crew. In April 1897, Peary was ordered to report to a naval yard in California. Peary requested a 5-year leave of absence to continue explorations with the goal of reaching the North Pole. The Navy refused, but a friend of Peary's got President McKinley to personally intercede. Peary's orders were then canceled, and his leave was granted, just as the Spanish-American War started. Peary continued to the Arctic from 1898 to 1902. While he was gone, President McKinley was assassinated. McKinley was the 3rd president to be assassinated and was killed by left-wing anarchist Leon Czolgosz. New York Police Lieutenant Joseph Petrosino believed that the same Italian-based anarchist group that assassinated conservative Italian King Umberto in 1900 was targeting McKinley, but his warnings were ignored. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt then took over as president. Roosevelt greatly approved of Peary's dedication to Arctic exploration. Peary would no longer have problems getting leave or obtaining support for his expeditions. In September of 1903, Peary was given 3 years of leave to pursue another attempt at the North Pole. Peary's Arctic Club raised $100,000 for the expedition and built the SS Roosevelt to address the ability to push through the ice. In July of 1905, the Roosevelt sailed north and reached the Arctic in March of 1906. After 2 weeks, they were forced to turn back due to food supply and declining conditions of the dogs. In July of 1908, Peary left on his last attempt to reach the pole. On March 1st, 1909, Peary, Henson, 7 other companions, 17 Eskimos, 133 dogs, and 19 sledges set off from Cape Columbia. By the end of March, the last supporting party turned back, leaving Peary, Henson, 4 Eskimos, and 40 dogs to make the final push for the pole. On April 6, 1909, Peary made observations that indicated he had reached 90 degrees latitude, the North Pole. He raised the Stars and Stripes and made it back to Cape Columbia in 16 days due to good weather. On September 5, 1909, the Roosevelt arrived in Indian Harbor, Labrador. Peary cabled the news to the world that he reached the North Pole. Peary would soon learn that 5 days prior to his famous cable, the surgeon from his first expedition, Frederick Cook, announced that he had reached the pole on April 21, 1908.
His claim to reach that geographical North Pole was a subject of a lot of controversy. So for one, Matthew Henson, who was basically his partner for the expedition, he actually reached that North Pole shortly before Peary got to that location. But there has been some arguments over whether he actually was the first person to reach that North Pole. One of the main issues is after Peary returned civilization, he learned that Dr. Cook, who was actually on one of his Greenland expeditions, Dr. Cook claimed that in 1908 he already reached the North Pole. The issue with both of their statements was there really was no independent verification of either one of them. Most organizations, including the National Geographic organization, awarded Peary the honor of reaching the North Pole first.
The press and public initially sided with Cook, but the National Geographic Society commissioned a committee of experts who sided with Peary. Years later, Cook again achieved notoriety when he's convicted of promoting worthless oil stocks and sent to prison. In 1910, Congress introduced a bill to recognize Peary's achievements by promoting him the Rear Admiral. In 1917, Peary was diagnosed with anemia. He died in his Washington, D.C. home on February 20th, 1920. He was buried in Arlington Cemetery.